Welcome back to the channel. So in this episode, as you probably guessed, we're going to go through rucksacks. I'm going to talk about my three main factors that I look for anyway when it comes to rucksack selection, and a couple of things that you can actually do to improve the rucksack itself. So a few amendments you can make that are super simple. Okay, so if you don't know who I am, my name's John Batty. I'm a former Royal Marines mountain leader, spent pretty much a decade in the Royal Marines all over the world. Went to Antarctica, South Georgia, Falklands, Norway in the winter, did loads of skiing, all over the Alps, Swiss Alps, French Alps, been to Bavaria, all over the mountainous areas in the UK, all over Scotland. I've also done civilian qualifications, so I'm summer mountain leader qualified, working on my winter mountain leader qualification. I've done joint service adventure training qualifications in mountaineering, climbing, and other bits. So yeah, that's all going to be brought in to these factors really, that's from my experience. So let's get stuck in anyway. So the first thing that I look for in a pack, and this is very much come from the Royal Marines, is that it's got a decent top flap. So top flap is this section here, this floaty bit at the top. You can obviously buy packs, or you can use packs that have got a zip on the top. The problem with this is when it's pissing it down, the rain is obviously going to go into that zip. It's not very waterproof at all. Water's just going to run straight into your pack. And then in the winter, if you're doing any winter mountaineering, those zips, especially if they've not got like a seal over the top, if it's not a design, specifically designed for hiking, but essentially those zips can get covered in snow, and then it can thaw out, get wet, and then it freezes, and then again, so it's like a freeze-thaw effect. It becomes this frozen block on your zips, and it just becomes impossible to actually open them up unless you reheat it, and yeah, which is a nightmare. This can obviously happen on other zips in the pack, which is why it's super important to make sure that you've got something to go over those zips. And in the winter, you definitely don't want to be walking around with your pack like this where the zip's exposed. You want to make sure that all these flaps are over the zips so that snow doesn't get on them and cause that problem. So yeah, super useful for water resistance, but also we had this obsession in the Royal Marines with top flapping things. So we used to call it top flapping when we would basically have our rucksack would be completely full, and we'd still have stuff to carry with us because we always had loads of stuff. So we'd basically stick it in this top area and we'd flip the top flap over the top of it, do it up, pull it nice and tight, and that would just give you that additional space in the top so you can carry extra kit. So you tighten it up, you pull it down nice and tight, so whatever it was sat in the top here, and it would be sat there. So what we'd have normally is we'd have these massive 120 litre rucksacks with all of our main gear, and then we would top flap additional kit or additional ammunition or even a grab bag. So we'd stick a smaller rucksack similar to this size inside the top flap of the big rucksack. So we were carrying a lot of kit, but it's such a versatile thing. It gives you that additional flexibility for top flapping stuff. So when we were going out to Norway, for example, we carry these massive 4-man tents. If we weren't carrying them in the pulks, so in a sled behind us, we would have to put them in the top flaps of our Bergens and ratchet them down essentially in the top flap. So we'd waterproof them, ratchet them down. And that's definitely something you could do with a rucksack like this. If you're going away for multiple days and you had a tent and it was quite a big bulky tent, you'd want to take the tent poles and pegs out so that you can slide them into your rucksack and get the weight nice and close to your body, and then have the lighter material section at the top. So yeah, super ideal. And then because they are a floating, well, you want a floating top flap. So basically where at the back here, I'll just open this up to show you, what you want is to be able to extend this up. So here we've got these straps where we can actually lengthen this and extend it. In the Forces, it was sewn in and it was fixed, and the problem with that is when you went to top flap stuff, if you had something that was massive, the top flap didn't cover it properly, and when you pulled it, all it did is pull the item forwards. Whereas when you've got a floating top flap, you can loosen it off and then bring the top flap back down directly on top of the item and ratchet it down both sides so the pressure's pulling it downwards rather than sideways. So having a floating top flap is mega useful. So that's the top flap. There's also, in the top flap still, there's also the fact that you're going to have a good amount of additional storage, usually in some form of zipped compartment, usually on the top and underneath. So I normally carry bits that I want to be easily accessible in the underneath, so my valuables, so like car keys and bits like that, but then also I'd usually put my head torch in there, and then in the top I would usually carry some snacks and stuff that I want easily accessible, usually some gloves and a hat as well. So that's the first thing that I look for in a rucksack. The second thing that I look for in a rucksack at the moment is having adjustable straps, so areas that I can pull the bag in to make it smaller, so that I can actually shrink the bag, make it much smaller and much more compact, so that when I've not got as much stuff in there, I can tighten it up and make it a really compact rucksack, so that everything's in nice and neat and the weight is distributed nicely across my back, rather than having things just drop to the bottom and swinging around loosely. So it just gives you that little bit of additional versatility, I guess, within the pack itself. It offers a little bit more, so it could be a smaller pack or it could be a much larger pack. If you open up all the straps, you can make it much bigger, carry more kit. So that is obviously really beneficial. Something I want to add to this as well is, because it's quite different to most packs that I've used previously, there's no clips on the top flap, and there's no clips on these side sections here as well, where I've just been showing how you can tighten it up. Now the benefit of this is, so when it gets cold, so in the winter, when you're out mountaineering in the snow, this does obviously get cold because it's a piece of metal. I'll tell you what, I'm going to put it against the black background so you can see it. It obviously gets cold, but it doesn't get as brittle as plastic. So the problem with plastic is it can get quite brittle and it can be easy to snap when it gets cold, whereas this does get cold but it doesn't get as brittle as plastic and it's not as easy to break. The other thing is, because it isn't a clip where I'm having to use my fingers, so I don't need as much dexterity to be able to clip it together. So all I need to do here is literally with my hands twist it, and I can basically have it not clipped up but attached, you know what I mean? And I can undo it without having to use my fingers as well. So it's just a case of, if I had mitts on, a few twists and I can undo it, and same again, I can do it up. And that's just super simple, so much better for in the winter rather than having to faff trying to unclip things. So really good. As well as that, if you stand on a clip as well, obviously you're going to break it, so the more clips you've got, the more chance you've got standing on one, and then all of a sudden you then can't do your top flap up, which is a bit of a pain, or some of your sides can't tighten up very easily, which is a pain. Okay, and then the next feature that I look for is having accessible areas that are separate from the top. And for me, that's super important, because I just feel like it's so much nicer to be able to separate my equipment and my kit, to be able to access certain items, to get them out when I need them at certain times. In the Forces, we used to have side pouches, and these were also known as rocket pouches. So you'd have your main bag, and then you'd be able to zip these side pouches on. I think they were about 15, 20 litres each side. They were quite a decent size. And in there you could have additional stuff that you wanted to be easily accessible. So if you're camping under a tarp, you'd have all your tarp gear in one side, so you can get your tarp up and then take your kit in, and then you can get your kit out of the actual main rucksack itself. So for this, I want something where I can access other bits of kit, because when it comes to setting up my tent, the last thing I want to do is have my tent at the bottom of my rucksack, have to open up my rucksack and then get all of my kit out to be able to get my tent to my tent. So I don't want to have to be getting all my kit out, put it on the ground, to then get all the way to the bottom to get my tent out and put my tent up. Obviously I could put my tent in the very top, but then it'd be a pain in the ass throughout the day whenever I'm wanting to access mid layers or something like that. You know, if I only had one area that I could access, I'd have to take my tent out every time I stopped to then get a mid layer out, or a Gore-Tex jacket or whatever it may be. So having these separate zips makes it really easy to access certain bits of kit. So I can separate things. I can have a mid layer where it's down the side, and I've got a side zip here, so I can easily access mid layers, for example. Or I could have them at the bottom, because I've got this little zip here where I can access it separately. And I've also got an area, so from the bottom here, there's an actual, inside the pack itself, there is a zip, so I can basically separate the top compartment to the bottom compartment completely, and it means that this kit in here is completely separate. So during my summer mountain leader course, which is civilian qualification, I was out with a group, and one of the guys, his admin was appalling, and he was on assessment as well, so he was being assessed. I don't know how he passed, but his admin was terrible. He basically had everything waterproofed in Tesco shopping bags that were full of holes, and when it got to setting up the tent, he literally would get all of his kit out, put it all over the ground in carrier bags. It was chucking it down, rain was going into the carrier bags, windy, his kit was getting blown everywhere. He'd then get his tent out the bottom, put his tent up, and then he'd start gathering all of his kit that had blown all over the hill to then put inside his tent. And then in the morning, again, he had to put his tent down, so he had to take all of his kit out of his tent, put it all over the ground, put his tent away while his kit was blowing everywhere and get him soaking wet, stuff his tent to the bottom, and then start gathering his kit and putting it on top. Whereas when you've got a setup like this, you literally, everything's tied up, everything's stowed away. You get to your campsite. If you've got your tent in the bottom of your rucksack, boom, tent out, go and square it away. Poles obviously could be in your top bit, but it usually just slid down the side. So get your tent poles out, boom, good to go. Nothing else has to come out. And this is a massive, massive lesson that I learned in the Royal Marines, is not getting kit out and leaving it loafing all over the hill. First of all, because obviously if it's windy and it blows away, you've stuffed it. Especially if you get a jacket out and leave it on the ground and the wind picks up, it blows off an edge, it's gone and you're stuffed. If it's vital equipment, especially like sleeping mats or anything like that, just make sure it's all stowed away. But the other thing is, if it's dark, you put something on the ground and you completely forget about it and you walk off, you've stuffed it again because you've lost some kit. So massive, massive lesson is to be all over your kit admin, making sure that everything's stowed away in your bag. You know exactly where everything is, and you only get out what you need, set up your tent, then you take your bag, put it into the tent, and then of course from there you can do all your admin inside the tent and everything stays dry, nothing gets blown away. Super, super organised. So those were the three main things really that I look for in a rucksack. Some of the other things that I look for in a rucksack as well, depending on what I'm using it for, but if I'm using it for mountaineering, is somewhere that your axes can attach to. Now this is super fantastic for climbing axes, because all these do is they slot through the centre hole of the climbing axe. So they slot through the centre hole, pull it through, and it attaches onto it and it locks in, and then the shaft itself goes through this section here and clips in. Really nice and useful. However, they don't fit through my walking axe. My walking axe doesn't have a big enough hole. So actually what you end up having to do is pull the elastic back and basically just slot the walking axe shaft through there. And it is a little bit wobbly. It's not the best. It's not what it's designed for, but it works. So normally a little material loop is all that you need to be able to slide your shaft of the axe through and pull it back on itself and then clip it in up top. That's absolutely fine. Areas for walking poles as well. Super useful. So obviously the base of the walking pole gets pushed through this little grey tab here. Okay, it goes through there, and then the shaft gets attached up the top here. So having those, mega beneficial, because obviously it means that you've actually got areas that you can attach your axes and your walking poles to. So that's the main things I look for. Now, what can you do to improve your pack? Well, one of the first things that I do is I actually, if you can see here, is I tape up any excess strap that I don't need to use. So when you get your pack, it's got loads and loads of excess on your straps, and when you get out into the mountains, you've got this brand new pack that you got on your back. It's all fancy, it's all great, but all these straps are flapping around in the wind, and what you'll tend to find is you'll just get whipped in the eye, whipped in the face, and it's not very pleasant. And if you've got someone walking next to you, or walking behind you up a hill and they're getting whipped by your straps, nothing worse. So the first thing that I do is roll up the excess, anything that you don't need, and then tape it up. So once you've sized it up to yourself and you've made all your adjustments on the pack, you basically tape up the excess so that you don't have it flapping around everywhere. Some locations you might not be able to tape it up, such as this here, because sometimes I pull it all the way down, but then that's just as it is, just what it is. Sometimes you can't tape everything up, but most of the areas that you can tape up, definitely tape them up and get them out of the way. One of the other things is taping up clips as well. So this is something that we did in the Royal Marines. There's nothing worse than putting your pack down and then someone standing on your clip, breaking it, and then it being completely unusable, especially around your waist, because you want these are super important, your waist strap, because obviously it shifts the weight onto your hips. So one of the things you can do is clip it together when you put it on the ground, so it's a bit more stable and secure, so that when someone stands on it, it might have some chance of not breaking. But the other thing you can do is tape around it. So at least if someone stands on it and one side cracks, at least you can still clip the actual strap together, you can clip it together and still use it for the meantime until you change that clip. Because if you don't have that, then all that happens is when you've got a crack in the side, obviously that just spreads apart and your clip doesn't work and doesn't function. So when you're out on the hill, at least you've got that good to go. So yeah, those are the things I look for with my pack, and those are the things that I would do to improve it as well. But actually, before I go, there is one other thing. So if your zips don't have a decent handle on them, I would definitely add some form of cord, so that in the winter, when you've got your thick gloves on, if you've got a tiny little zip handle, it's a pain in the ass to try and grip onto, to try and open it. So you want to make sure that you've got either something big like this, something big and plastic, or you make your own cord loop, and then you grab the cord loop and you can unzip it a lot easier. So that's something else I would add to the rucksack as well. Yeah, like I said, if you've got anything else that you would add to it, please drop it in the comments, because I'd love to hear what other people do. And yeah, it's always great to learn from other people. But hopefully you enjoyed that video, and I'll see you in the next one.